Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Isaac. And of course, going to the dark room with the D6, we can expect some shenanigans to happen along the way. And usually I'm not too excited about it, because I know that with the D6 and Isaac, there's just a lot of variance included. And someone is gonna find something that I'm necessarily not gonna find. You know, people are gonna make maybe wacky decisions to try to get a leg up on the opponent. Sometimes it's gonna work, sometimes it's not gonna work, but it really does depend on your playstyle. And with me, I try to reroll for the devil deals first, because I feel like that's the most impactful pull. Then I try to go to the shoves because that's the most impactful pull for breaking things. And then of course maybe I reroll some of the other pedestals that exist in the game. And I would think that some people maybe prefer shops, maybe some people prefer treasure rooms because they want a lot of synergies or whatever. And obviously all of those different things can have a very different impact on your run and also just how the run feels like. And there's just no element to that we can control. But what the D6 does, which I think is very positive, it gives you autonomy over your decisions. And you can say, I don't like this item for whatever reason. You can even say, I don't like the sprite of this item, I'm not picking it up because I want to look very pretty and nice. It's very up to you to reroll it. And just having an item that essentially allows you to say, I'm not gonna pick up this item for any reason and just reroll it into something else. So that item is actually still useful, if nothing else than just as a reroll pedestal. And I think that's, again, a really healthy decision for the game and just the community and the player who's playing it, because it gives you, or at least it gives you a feeling that you have a choice over the decisions you're making. It doesn't feel like you're forced to take something if you really don't like it, and it doesn't feel like you have to do something in order to get a really good score. There's always an excuse. I re-rolled it in hopes of actually trying to get a really good item. Even if it's not something that the majority of people would do, that's just what really would give you the leg up on the opponents. If majority of people picked up this item because it's maybe very good, I decided to re-roll it in hopes of getting an even better item, even if maybe the reasons are something else. You could always kind of fall back onto that explanation just to kind of stay competitive and still actually make sense of what you're trying to say. And of course that's a very valid strategy. I wouldn't say that it's not. Maybe it's not objectively, like if you look at it the terms of expected value, how many points you're gonna get for a play like that, it's probably not gonna be high. But a lot of people don't try to get the highest score on average, they're just trying to get the highest score on that particular daily. And in that particular case, that strategy, of course, like I said, can be very beneficial, and it can be something that you can employ in your dailies. And of course, because of that, I feel like the Isaac is an incredibly healthy character, and it's very nice to have him, because his runs just tend to be a little bit stronger on average, especially with the diluted item pools. There's so many items that you kind of want to take. I mean, you don't want to take, but you want to take them because you're inclined to do so because they're gonna give you a stat benefit. You don't want to skip out something that's maybe good, that gives you an objective upgrade, but is maybe just not that enjoyable to use. For example, I remember chocolate milk was a big one. It's just an objectively good item, or at least it was, but people didn't like it because you didn't get a lot of benefits for picking it up. And having the D6 in that situation can essentially give you an excuse to reroll it and maybe try to turn it into something better. And of course, when you combine all of those things together, I think what you end up with is a character that's very enjoyable to play for everyone. Of course, it can be a bit annoying to be min-maxing with your battery charges and your D6 just going back and forth trying to reroll and really get a lot of good items. And especially when you get into breaking, you have to go to the shops, you have to go maybe to the treasure room, just kind of going back and forth again, just to try and get those a few breaking items. Eventually, you're gonna get something like blank card, and of course, things are gonna escalate from there. But up until that point, I feel like when you have a run like this one, where you just have a lot of really strong items at the start, and you're not forced to reroll any of them. Like we got Death's Touch in the very first item room, and the next treasure room had Mom's Contacts. And I would imagine that's items that most people wouldn't reroll, but some people would. And just having the option there is what I feel like made this run a bit more enjoyable. I also tend to find, but this is maybe like more of an observation than necessarily fact, is that people tend to be just enjoyed Isaac dailies a lot more. And you know, maybe there's a few people who say, I don't like Isaac dailies in general, but I feel like the threads are usually more positive. And I think that's just a direct causation of the runs being a lot stronger, just because of the reasons that the D6 obviously makes your run stronger on average, because you can reroll the bad items out of the pools. But of course, if you just, I said of course a lot during this video, but don't like berate me for that. I think that's my natural transition word, if that makes sense. I think everyone has like that transition word where they want to say something and they chain it in another sentence, and obviously it's much easier when you're typing things out to think of other ones, but when you're just talking and improvising like I am right now, then it's very easy to fill them in. I don't think they're very noticeable until someone points it out, like I did just now. So I'm sure that because I mentioned you're gonna hear it in the future as well. But okay, so let's ignore that for now and just focus on the run at hand. And you might notice I didn't really talk about it, and that's because it was a fairly standard Isaac run up until this point, and it's gonna be a fairly standard run past this point as well. But there's always some things that I could improve. Like for example, in this particular one, I decided to take Chemical Peel. Under the pretense it's a damage upgrade, even if it's only like on every second tier, not on every tier. I just felt like because it is a damage upgrade, there's no reason to pass it up. But there was also the Glowing Hourglass, and there's a decision to be made there. So do I want to pick up the Glowing Hourglass and start rerolling it with a D6? Obviously, every third wave, I could use my D6, try to get a really good item. You can imagine me getting something like a Guppy item, or maybe even Tech X, or maybe even something crazier than that. I'm not really sure if there are crazier items in Tech X, but let's imagine there are. Of course, the possibilities are endless. And if you got that, we would have obviously picked it up, but if you didn't, of course, we could always just fall back to just using the D6 and ignoring whichever item was on that pedestal, or maybe, we would find a Black Rune and we could suck it up, and that would be a viable alternative just to get some stat upgrades. And I didn't do that, because the main reason was I had the Glowing Light Bulb. I'm not sure if it's called, maybe it's just like Dim Light Bulb. I know one is dim, and obviously this one isn't dim because it's turned on, so whatever the not dim light bulb is, I'm just gonna call it not dim light bulb. I'm just gonna say light bulb. Okay, that doesn't make sense, but whatever. And essentially, if you want to get the stats from this trinket, you need your item to be fully charged. And if I had to use it every third wave, I feel like that would detract a lot from it. And there was also a decision to be made. Do I want to keep the purple trinket, which increases the rate of champions? And obviously that would increase my points of exploration bonus, because champion enemies tend to give you more points on average. But I felt like this was going to be a much better choice if I want to actually maximize my points. It's going to give me more speed, which means my time penalty is going to be lower. It's going to give me more damage and more DPS, which means I can take enemies out faster. In turn, of course, there's going to be less chance for me to get hit, because I tend to not fight them as long, which means I'm not exposed to their attacks for a prolonged period of time. And of course, that does allow me to get out of the way. And I felt like just because of the damage penalty and how severe it is, as opposed to every other penalty, this particular light bulb would be the right decision. And I feel like it was, and not only because of that, of the things I've mentioned, but also it just feels like, again, maybe more strategic, maybe a little bit more involved, just to kind of keep track on your item. You don't want to use your D6 now for no reason, because you could be getting a stat benefit if you keep it charged. And when you have something like Sackboy, it's not that big of a deal, because there are battery charges everywhere. But even without it, even with it, there's a lot of nuance and just decisions to be made. So do you want to reroll this item, or do you maybe want to wait for the next item? And there's always those little things that you can kind of influence. And of course, you can kind of min-max your score to the top, and that just makes you feel like you're involved in the run a lot more. And I tend to enjoy runs like that, because I feel like they're a bit more cerebral and just a little bit more mental and like mind game focused, than opposed to just really raw skill or something like that. And I feel like that gives me maybe a leg up on the run, even if it maybe doesn't even change that much. Because, having an extra stat every third room, or as opposed to like every fourth room or whatever, isn't really probably gonna make a difference, but it can make a difference for like one hit on average, and it's gonna give me like 300 points. And I just feel good knowing that there's a chance for me to have saved like those potential hypothetical 300 points, that I feel like already just having this trinket makes me feel better about myself. And maybe in turn it makes me feel like I'm playing better, which is probably not the case, but I felt like I was performing pretty well like I said before, like up until a certain point on this run. So once I got through that, because I didn't pick it up, I was just kind of focusing on other things. And obviously with penetrative shots, sudden things become much better. Not sudden things, but certain items become much better. Something like the screw, I would consider usually like an average item, because while it does increase your tear rate, it also increases your shot speed, and that tends to kind of mess out your tear rate, because you're knocking enemies back further, which makes it harder to hit them. But with penetrative shots, we don't really have to worry about knockback, because enemies don't have it anymore. So we're just able to shoot at them faster, just output a lot more DPS. And of course, things like Chemical Peel also improve because of the tear rate, so that kind of works in tandem with each other. And even certain things like Evil Eye also work really well, because now we have Mom's Contacts, we freeze enemies in place, so the shots that we actually shoot from the Evil Eye are just much more guaranteed to hit. So I felt like everything in this run just kind of came together, and especially towards the end, we had the usual breaking combo of Sackboy, the D6, and we also had the room bag. So you might expect what's gonna happen at the end of the Dark Room, because eventually I do get a Temperance card, I place it in the secret room, I get a Yara rune, then of course I duplicate the Temperance card, I get 2 item pedestals. This time I didn't blow the Temperance machines up like I did in one of the previous video. For some reason I didn't get the item pedestals, even though that's I think what's supposed to happen. Like if you blow up a machine, an arcade machine or a blood bank in a dark room or a chest with a bomb, then I think you're supposed to get an item pedestal, or at least that's how it worked. But on one particular daily I know it didn't happen, so I just don't want to take the risk anymore. I don't really want to go in an experiment as to why that happened. And I just had an Algis rune, so I just used that to play the Temperance cards. Of course, eventually I got 2 plot bags out of it, and then I just started re-rolling with all the battery charges that have been accumulated with me just going through the rooms and trying to clear them. Another great help here was definitely the Sack of Sacks, and I debated if I should even pick it up, because I felt like there's no reason for me to take it, since I already have Sackboy, I have a lot of ways to generate consumables. But later on I felt like just increasing my odds of finding a combo like this one that would allow me to break and get a Forget Me Now would be a good idea, and I think it definitely did help in some regards. But I think if I want to mention another thing here, is I'm gonna cut, like when I get to the second dark room, when I use the Forget Me Now, check my points before I start exploring it and after I actually finish it. And I think you're gonna end up with not that of a surprising number, but really something that just gonna tell you that maybe something's not right. And if you were paying attention just right now, I actually lost 200 points just by going there. And when I started exploring like the last 3 rooms, I was only up about 100 points after using the Forget Me Now. So using the Forget Me Now on the second dark room only netted me something like 200 points in total, which is obviously not a lot. It's still something, but the fact was I actually got hit so many times during the second pass through the dark room. There were a lot of very nasty rooms, like double cage rooms in a very small one, and of course those double cages were actually champion cages, which means there were 4 of them, and that can be quite hard to actually dodge. But there are also some 4 mega fatty rooms, and sometimes they jump very fast and their hitbox is deceptively large, so they end up hitting it that way. But other than that, I feel like this run went really well. 51,000 points is obviously great for basically any daily, and especially only a daily that doesn't necessarily go to Mega Satan, with 21,000 exploration bonus, with 7,500 Shrek bonus, and of course we completed all of the important objectives to get to the end. Our damage penalty wasn't that high in retrospect. 4,000 isn't like super a lot, it's still a little bit more than what I would wish for it to be, but honestly I have no complaints. This was a great daily. I had like a really long day, I had 2 maybe a bit more of an underperformed dailies, so just being back in the saddle and on top of it just feels really good. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as you did, not you, as much as I did, and I hope to see you next time.